In this video we shall talk about Selenium IDE CSS locators in details. CSS locators use CSS syntax and CSS selectors to find an element in the document. And in CSS, selectors are some patterns used to select some elements. Before we proceed, here is some disclaimer. Because this is not a complete CSS guide, please refer to this manual or any other special manual on CSS. Here we only speak about CSS locators in Selenium IDE. The first comes Universal Selector. Here it is. It selects all elements or all elements inside another element. It's rarely used on its own, but nevertheless. Here on the left on this screen and other ones, you see some example from HTML and CSS. Imagine such CSS rule. For all elements we are using margin 0 and padding 0. This is how the HTML page looks before applying such a rule, and here how it looks after. You see no margin or padding there. And here is the example on how to use some Selenium IDE locator. We write CSS equals sign, then we write that we want any UL unordered list element, then any element, then a element inside. And that's the same like this one, so we see any UL element and any a element inside that UL element. So it looks for such elements. A elements inside any UL elements. And here it is. We already seen the element selector on the previous screen, but here is some more information about it. It selects all elements with specified element name. For instance, here is some HTML and CSS example. Let's consider we want to somehow improve paragraph elements with the following rule. Apply some font. Here how it looks before, here after. You may see that the font is not the same as here. Why is it so? Because this element is paragraph. And how can we use Selenium IDE locators to locate such elements? We write CSS, then we write LI and P, so it looks for paragraphs inside of list item elements. Here it is, P element inside of LI element. Class selector selects elements with specific class attribute, and we have to write the period character followed by the name of the class. Here's the CSS and HTML example. Here's the period and name of the class. Again, period and name of the class, and some rule inside like color red or color green. Here's the before, here's the after. We see red here, green here. Why is it so? Because we are applying those classes like red here, here, and green here. And how can we use it in Selenium IDE? We write the period sign and then the class name, and we may even use element name here, because here we are looking for any element with the red class, and here we are looking for P elements with red class. So for the first locator, here's the match, any element with the red class, and another element with the red class, but here we can only detect P element with the red class. ID selector is simple. It selects elements with specific ID attribute value. Here is the example. Let's assume we want something to be marked with background yellow color. Here it is before, here it is after. Why is it so? Because this paragraph has the following ID marked. How can we use it in Selenium IDE? We write CSS locator, we write the sharp sign here and the ID value. So this looks for any element with such ID. We may also use element name, so this looks for a p element with such ID value. And here it is. And here it is. With attribute selector, we may select elements with specified attribute value or even with specified attribute existing. Here are some examples. We select any links with existing target attribute. Or here we select links with href value equals to _self. Or here we select any link with href attribute having the following value. And we apply some rules, like coloring here. It's before, it's after. And with Selenium IDE we may look for any element having target attribute. So here they are. Or we may look for a link having target attribute with _blank value. And here it is. Descendant selectors and descendant locators look for elements within other elements, no matter how deep they are. Here is the example. Ordered list and list items within those ordered lists. Spans within spans within spans. So it's before and after application of those coloring rules, and how can we use it in Selenium IDE? Here's the first example. We look for any list items inside ordered lists. Here it is. We see ordered list and list item inside that ordered list. And here we look for span inside span inside span. Here it is. The first span inside the second span inside the third span. The child selector is a little bit similar to previous one, but it selects elements with one hierarchy level only. Here is the example. We look for italic right inside paragraph. So there must be nothing between them. Here's before and after example with the coloring. We see that this italic is right inside this paragraph and nothing is here, nothing, no elements. There may be text, but there should be no elements. And with Selenium IDE we can do the same. We look for any italic element that is directly inside a paragraph. Here it is. But this I element, as we can see here, is not right inside the P element, because the span is here and it breaks this rule. The immediately after selector also looks a little bit similar, but it doesn't look with hierarchy. It works with sequence. Let's see the example. We have to make read any italic text that goes after paragraph. Here's before and after. How does it work? Here we see the paragraph and here we see the italic right after the paragraph, immediately after the paragraph. With Selenium IDE we can do the same. We look for the italic text right after the P element. So this italic text complies with this rule, but this italic text does not comply with this rule. Why is it so? Because here we have paragraph, here we have not paragraph, here we have another element, this italic element. So the third line here, it does not go right after the P. It is like P, then something, then italic, and there may not be that something there. It should be only P and italic right after, like in this first case. And one more locator that works with a sequence. It selects elements that are located after another elements with one hierarchy level. Here we see the example. We want some italic text after any paragraph to be green. Here's before and after, and we see the paragraph here, and any italic text after the paragraph has become green. But this italic text is not green because it's not after that paragraph, it's before that paragraph. With Selenium IDE, idea is the same. We look for any italic text preceded by p element, and here they are. Unlike in previous case, this italic has also become green because it doesn't matter how far is it after. It may be on the first position, on the second, on the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and so on. So please do not confuse this idea with this idea. This is right after, it's just after. Pseudo-class selector finds elements with some specific state. The state is the main idea here. Let's look at the example. Imagine we have two input fields. When we click mouse on one or another, we pass the focus to that element. And here we see that state. That only focused element should have this 1 pixel solid green border. And we see here this one is not focused now, but if we click somewhere here and pass the focus here, that border will also be switched here. In Selenium IDE, we use the same syntax. We want to find input that is focused now. So here it is. And please see that here all those elements look the same. The focused state is only state. It may go here, here, or to any other element we like. When we click, the focus goes there. In CSS, there is also pseudo-elements selector for things like first letter or first line, so we may apply some rules to the first letter or the first line or anything like that. But as you can see in Selenium IDE, it's not supported for now. Maybe the support will begin in a couple of days or in a couple of years, but it is not in Selenium IDE for now. Now please pause the video and try to understand these CSS locators. What do they look for? And here is the answer. This one looks for any header1 element. This one looks for a div element with a class tagline. This one looks for any link inside any list item with ID enter. This one looks for any link with one level of hierarchy inside a div with result class. This one looks for unordered list after some list item. This one looks for a link which has an href attribute ending with .pdf. And this one looks for a link that is visited and is inside one level of hierarchy of div with such ID, and that div has to be inside a span with an alpha class. Of course, all this may look not so easy from the first point of view, but once you become more and more acquainted with CSS and CSS selectors and then CSS locators, the easier you may find this approach. So just try it. The perfection comes from practice.